Hello and good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Charlotte Potter-Kasich. I am the Executive Director of the Barrie Art Museum. Oops. And Lex, I'm going to need you to make me able to share my screen because somehow I am not the host again. I apologize, everyone. How are we doing this Thursday evening? All right, let me try again. Thanks. Okie doke. So here we are. I'm excited to tell you a little bit more about the Barrie Art Museum. So today we are here for Motion Emotion, monthly virtual lecture series. We have an invigorating conversation between Dr. Khan Iftekharuddin and Joseph Morris. We've kind of titled this fun, the Emotive Machine You'll See for Reasons shortly. Before we jump into the actual program, I want to talk to you a little bit about the Barrie Art Museum and just locate you in our institution. We are at the gateway of ODU, right on Hampton Boulevard in Norfolk, Virginia. Our collection is primarily contemporary glass, American modernist paintings, marine paintings, as well as dolls, historic dolls and automata. And the exhibit that this particular lecture this evening is inspired after is an exhibition that took our cue from the image far right, thinking about automata. We built that to think a little bit about how automata are essentially historical robots, the very first robots. We have a bunch of different free programs at the Barrie Art Museum, anything from free yoga to 3D virtual tours. We hope that you'll peruse our offerings online. And jumping a little bit into this changing exhibit that we have right now. So as I said, I have 4 galleries. 2 of them are devoted to the glass and the paintings. 1 is devoted to the dolls and automata, and this final gallery is our changing gallery. And right now the show that's on view is Motion Emotion, Exploring Affect from Automata to Robots. It's up February 10th through December 31st. It has a good long run, so you all must come and see it. And it's investigating the emotional qualities of automata and robots. It features selections from our permanent collection of our historical automata. I'll show you a few, as well as works by contemporary artists, as well as scientists. And today we're going to hear from 2 of those. The show is presented by the George and Grace Dragas Family Foundation. We have to thank the Dragas companies for their support, as well as Susan and David Good. I also want to take a minute to thank all of our partners, CHKD, GSA, VMask, as well as all of the wonderful members of our Exhibition Advisory Committee. And you'll hear from Dr. Khan Iftekharuddin this evening, who is one of the really pivotal members. Typically, these committees don't actually change the whole shape of an exhibition. In this case, they really did. They inserted a lot of really incredible work that's been developed right on our ODU campus and pieces that we had no idea existed until we started to research the show. So they've been really pivotal in the exhibit. Just to sort of ground you in what an automata is, here's just a few from our collection. Most people used to walk into our galleries and they would assume that they were dolls. They didn't realize that they were actually animated and that they moved. So part of the exhibit is that we did do this video that starts to show a little bit of the way that automata move. There's a set number of things that they can do. They are primarily done for entertainment. We often use the word whimsy, they're very whimsical. They were developed primarily in Parisian France because that is where you would find this sort of strange intersection of lots of different industries. Dolls, artisans, craftspeople, clockmakers, and engineers would all come together to create these sorts of pieces. And that's just one. That was the Pure Wedding Harlequin. Other pieces in our show include robotics developed and used for research by ODU faculty, alumni, and interns. It ranges from a lot of different kinds of material here. We have medical applications, we have military applications, but today we're going to focus in on just one. I'm actually going to skip right over that last slide. Just one of these, the Now Robot. So this conversation, was inspired by this exhibit because both Joseph Morris, who's a contemporary artist in the show, and Dr. Khan Iftekharuddin, both in the show, are making machines that sort of play with emotion in different ways. And we'll see sort of where the projects converge and where they diverge through this conversation. Dr. Khan Iftekharuddin is a professor and endowed chair in machine learning in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at ODU. He has done a lot of different projects, but he's recently been cited among the top 2% of the most cited researchers worldwide throughout their careers. 2020 research by Stanford University. He was awarded Old Dominion University's 2020 Faculty Research Scholarship and Creative Achievement Award. He's also been serving as the Interim Dean in the Batten College of Engineering and Technology since 2021, and has concurrently served as the director of the ODU Vision Lab since 2011. The ODU Vision Lab aims to develop novel theory, state-of-the-art algorithms and architectures for learning and real-time applications and human and machine-centered interactions and recognition, biomedical imaging and signal analysis, and environmental and geoscience application based on disciplines. Moving right along, we also have Megan Withrow joining us today. She received her BS degree in computer engineering from ODU in 2018. She's currently a PhD student at the Vision Lab, where she met Dr. Iftekharuddin, and she's a graduate research fellow. Her graduate research focuses on the domain adaptation and computer vision for quantitative study of facial expressions and eye gaze data for children and young adults with autism spectrum disorder. Research intersects include computer vision, machine learning, statistics, human-computer interaction, and effective commuting. Please join me in welcoming our first two presenters this evening, Dr. Khan Iftekharuddin and Megan Withrow.
Good evening.
Thanks so much for coming on. Good evening. So to begin, would you guys like me to show this video, or do you guys want to introduce it at all? Up to you.
No, please go ahead and then we'll talk.
Okay, great. So I'm going to jump right into our first video that will help show you the shape of this project a bit more.
Now is an autonomous, programmable humanoid robot. The university's Vision Lab used the Now robot as a test bed for computer vision and AI research. The robot will support the lab's ongoing collaboration with Eastern Virginia Medical School to research facial expressions in children with autism spectrum disorder.
Hello, I'm Now from the Vision Lab. Welcome to the Berry Art Museum.
This is our humanoid robot Now.
His name is Now, and he may be the future of autism intervention, helping kids with the developmental disorder learn to better communicate and socialize.
He can talk, he can be programmed to do movements.
The idea for the research came from ODU professor Dr. Khan, whose nephew has autism.
That's where the interest started.
Khan's drive to help his nephew and others led to the study, which has two parts. The first uses web cameras to detect facial expressions.
You look happy.
Research assistant Megan Withrow demonstrated.
You look sad.
The goal is for interventions with children that have autism. In the past, we had some experiments where children came in and participated in trials where they looked at a stimulus on a screen, and that elicited some spontaneous facial response that we are then able to analyze and use the collected multimodal data such as eye tracker, 3D camera, thermal camera, visual video camera in order to find some significant difference in odd facial expressions. What Now does is he provides feedback to the children as they make their facial expressions, and is able to, using machine learning and computer vision, give some response as to how they're doing and how they're making the facial expressions and help them improve their communication skills.
You look surprised. I am surprised too. You look happy. Let's do a dance. You look scared. May I give you a hug? Let's play a game with rock, paper, scissors. Get ready. Rock, paper, scissors. Go. I chose paper. Let me see what you chose. It looks like you chose scissors. You win. Thanks for playing with me.
Now,
All right, so the robot that you just saw here, this is a humanoid robot, and it's called Now. We have been working in this research for more than 10 years now. So we had a few other students who had worked on this project and similar projects, and they have now graduated. And then eventually Megan, after she finished, in fact, she started working with me when she was a bachelor's degree student doing her degree here at ODU in her final year, I believe, and then continued on with her PhD with me. So the inspiration for this project, like you just briefly heard there, came from one of my nephews. So they are visiting us about 12, 13 years back. And one thing that I noticed that he did not communicate, and especially he did not look at the eyes at all, right? And of course he had autism, and it's not just me. He was not even looking at the eyes of his parents, and so that's something that triggered my interest. And I was trying to see how hard they are trying, their parents, to just to communicate with him so that they could feed him. At that time, he was a little boy, and engage him in different things. So then I started thinking that if there was a way that we could somehow grab his attention, or kids like him, or be at least be able to engage them somehow so that they can communicate and do some basic things, right? And as these kids grow, as you know, that as they grow into adulthood, this does not really resolve itself, and eventually as they get out to society, the problem actually piles up. It becomes more and more challenging issue for these kids, and eventually for these adults, to work in the society and engage in different things. So that was the idea. That's how we started. And then I extended my invitation to one of my colleagues at CHKD, Dr. John Harrington. He's a pediatrician in practice, but he actually sees these kids with autism. And he was very receptive, even though in most cases a busy doctor like him would not even pay attention to a crazy engineer, right? But he was nice. So that's how we started working together. We got access to his patients from his clinics, and we eventually designed different experiments. So what you see here is basically an embodiment of the interaction that we would like to be able to engage with these kids, right? So the video you just saw is some of the examples. If you go to the next slide, I can explain that a little more. So here is sort of what's happening in the background, right? So there it is, the robot now, and you see that the beam sort of coming, those are the two eyes, those are actually the cameras, right? So it's capturing the image in front of it. And these are low resolution cameras compared to the cameras that we have in our cell phones, very low resolution camera. So once, and in fact, that's the example that you see next to it in the next inset. So with those images, then we try to analyze the expressions, and like you saw in that video, that we actually write AI machine learning algorithms. Those then analyze these types of different videos that you see here. And in fact, here it shows in different scales and different resolutions. And then we take those, these are called feature space or representation of these faces. in different situations, and then we take them to different types of AI models and something called deep learning. And essentially, once we finish the analysis of this, the block diagrams that you see, the blue blocks in the bottom, and then in the end, it classifies different expressions, happy, sad, so on and so forth. And that's how then it basically spells out those expressions, the now, like you saw there in the video. So even though you're just seeing that, like as you saw, but essentially all these things are running on the processor, right? And some of it is done on board, meaning within the now, and some of it is actually done off on the computer and then being communicated in real time, right? And so there are a lot of many details that are going on in terms of processing, data analysis, machine learning, AI, that makes it happen. So one of the questions, in fact, earlier when we were presenting about a month or so back was, is it possible that this now, once it recognizes the expression, can really spell it out and perhaps whisper it to the mom or dad, right? Yeah, yes, it is possible, because if it can spell out "you're happy," then it can definitely whisper it to the caregiver, correct? So that's what. So I wanted to just give you an overview about what's happening. So now in the lab, what you're seeing here is just one example of how we're processing this data. There are many different models that we have developed, and in fact, a little later you'll hear from Megan. She's going to tell you more about what she's doing. Now, looking forward, where are you going with this? Is we would like to be able to, once we are able to pick up these different types of expressions, and then you'll see also in one example later that we'd like to be able to give cues to these children so that they can engage better, right? And once we are successful in that, we would then like to package this as a tool and make it available to the clinics so that when these kids come for their visit, this could be part of their therapy. And eventually, of course, perhaps way down the line, some of these could even be available at home, right? So that's the overall sort of goal that we are pursuing in this work. Next slide, please. Go ahead, Megan.
So as Dr. Khan just mentioned, one component of this project is the development of the algorithms, and you just saw an example. And some of that is what I do as a part of my PhD, is developing some more sophisticated types of algorithms that can even better address our problem, not just for general facial expression recognition, but for actually working with this population, with kids. Another important component of this research is actually collecting the data so that we can analyze the expressions and better understand how groups of children with autism and without autism differ in how they make the expressions. And as Dr. Khan mentioned, we work with Eastern Virginia Medical School. So we have our collaborator, Dr. Harrington. We also have another collaborator, Dr. Janice Keener, who is a psychologist and an expert in the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule, which is the gold standard for autism diagnosis. So we work with the two of them to recruit children that have autism, and we're also trying to recruit children that don't have autism as a comparison group. And we're recruiting now, so if anybody is interested or knows anybody who's interested, definitely send me an email. So we're looking at children and young adults, and we're trying to show them some stimuli that will engage them and have them either make an expression through a psychological process called automatic motor mimicry, or actually prompt them to make the expression. So that's an example, the example that you see in the bottom left here. We have one of our avatar characters asking the participant to make the expression. And then at the top, you see a wide variety of avatars. So as a part of this study, we have a module where the kids can actually click and make their own character. And research shows that when you give that option to kids and young adults, not just research, but also common sense, people take stake when you're able to represent yourself or customize the stimuli or the game. So that's another example and something that you'll see in our next slide as well. So the overall goal of this project is to get the information from EVMS. They're sharing with some of the clinical information, and what we're doing is we're using our algorithms that we developed to extract information from the facial expressions and the eye gaze of this online study based off of webcam-based eye tracking and also the webcam-based facial expressions. And then we're trying to figure out what is the association between the information we can get with our algorithms and the clinical scores, and be able to understand what does it mean if a child makes expression in a certain way. How does that correlate with the outcome measurements that the psychologist sees? So this is just one part in this next step to get to what we see here in this video, where the Now robot is going to interact with Elijah, who is one of our undergraduate research assistants who helped us make some of these demonstrations and was also really great to be willing to be an actor as well. So if we can go ahead and play the video.
Now it is time for you to make your own character. It is up to you what you choose.
So this is the exact same stimuli that we are running right now online with kids virtually.
Wow, what a cool character. Would you like to take a break now?
No.
Great. Next, see if you can recognize your character's facial expression. You're doing great. Keep going. Wow, you are great at recognizing expressions. Would you like to take a break?
Yes.
Okay, let's take a break. Would you like to play a game of rock, paper, scissors?
Yes.
Hooray, let's play. Get ready. Rock, paper, scissors. Go. I chose paper. Let me see what you chose. It looks like you chose scissors. You win. Thanks for playing with me. Would you like to move on to the next task?
Yes.
Here comes the next task. In this next task, see if you can make the same expression as your character. Great job. That looks like a surprise expression.
So not only is Elijah making the expression, but Now is also giving the feedback.
Your expression looks neutral. Try to match your character's expression. Nice. That looks like a happy expression.
So that was an example. If he didn't make an expression, then Now would come in and say, go ahead and make the expression, please.
Wait, that looks like a sad expression. Great. That looks like an angry expression. Nice work. That looks like a disgust expression. That looks like a scared expression. You did a great job matching your character's expression. Let's take a look at your character. Way to go today. You're all done. Goodbye.
So that was just one example of how, now can really get involved in helping the kids get through, for example, an intervention in the future. So that's our real hope.
That's fascinating, Megan. And so the goal is ultimately to try to help students to be able to both see the emotion, identify it, and then mimic it. And I feel it seems like that mimicry is sort of the hardest part and the part that you're currently doing the research on.
So our current research, we can really think of this research as having two parts. One major part is, can we understand what is the relationship between the differences that we see in facial expressions of kids that have autism and kids that don't, and how does that really correlate with the diagnostic and clinical measures? Because if we can get that kind of some of our computer vision based measures as like a shorthand for some of the clinical measures, that would be very useful in the development and improvement of intervention strategies, such as ones using the Now. Because right now, in order to collect those measures, you have to go through a psychologist, and psychologists have limited time, and some of the metrics that they use can only be administered once every couple of months or once every couple of years, where if you're trying to monitor somebody's how their skills are changing over time, it would be very good to have this kind of shorthand metric that correlates well with those outcomes. So that's really what our ongoing online study is aiming at now. And once we have that, then that will be a really great guide in making better interventions.
Great.
Right. So to add to that, what you just said, Charlotte, the mimicry is going to be a very difficult task for these kids because first of all, they don't even engage. And then once they do engage, we would like to see if they would respond, right? So mimicry is one of the example of response. So for us to be able to understand how things happen, that's what we're trying to sort of decipher the process here. Then if we can identify the process, then those would be the markers, so to speak, for us to be able to try with these kids to engage them and then have them to respond.
I see. Yeah, it seems like there's multiple phases for this project, and although it's already been going on for 10 years, it seems like it's something that could go on much longer. Well, thank you so much, Megan and Khan. We're going to jump into our next presenter, and then we will come back for a little Q&A at the end and have a conversation.
Okay.
So the next person who I'd like to introduce is Joseph Morris, who is a contemporary artist based in Brooklyn. He's an expert craftsman and coder who believes in the possibilities enabled by integrating technology in the arts. Joseph Morris has been working with electronics in his art since 2006, and he began by taking things apart and putting them back together to make sculpture collages with gears and motors and moving parts. He started experimenting with software and coding in around 2007 and has been integrating technology into his craft ever since. Joseph is a self-taught programmer, prototyper, and pro tinkerer. He was the recipient, oh wait, I can't find my thing. I was reading things. Oh yes, he was a recipient of the 2020 Downtown Brooklyn Public Art and Placemaking Fund, the 2017 New York Foundation for the Arts Fellowship in Electronic and Digital Media, and in 2017, the New York State Council of the Arts for Electronic Media grantee. He holds an MFA in Art and Technology and Studies from the School of Art Institute of Chicago and a BFA from Sculpture from SUNY Purchase. He is currently an instructor in 3D design and sculpture at SUNY Westchester Community College and serves on the Digital and Media Arts Advisory Committee for the NYFA. Please join me in welcoming Joseph Morris. Take it away, Joe.
I tried to make that short. It was longer. Those are the highlights. So hi, everyone. I'm Joseph Morris. You can call me Joe. Charlotte and I, oh, let me actually make this full screen before I keep going.
Yeah, while he's doing that, I can say that we met a long time ago. I'm so excited to finally have a reason to work with you again, Joe. It's just such an honor.
Yeah, this is where we met doing glass blowing, and I still had hair back then. So if you've gone to the exhibition, maybe you haven't, there's this piece in it, it's called Serpentine. It's part of a larger group of work of what I call breathing pieces. They're these sort of large scale choreographed sculptures that sometimes are sculptures, sometimes they're installations, depends on the piece. This one's more of an installation, but why don't I actually just kind of like run through some of the pieces, talk about where I came from, like how I got to this place, and then talk a little bit about some other work that we're going through. But let's just let me pause and optimize this 1 second. I have lost my meeting controls. Give me 1 minute.
Yeah, so while he's doing that, I can just preface that we have 3 pieces of his in the exhibit, Motion, Emotion. There's Imminence, Serpentine, and Body. All 3 of them, the public can come and see. And one thing that we've been thinking and talking a lot about is how the materials are so fragile, and how much like a body, they breathe and they emote, but also like a body, they break down. Joe, for people who might not know what they are looking at, can you explain the materials that you're using?
Sure, yeah, thanks for prompting me. I could just kind of like fall into this piece. It just kind of gets a little bit meditative. But this is a breathing piece made from really thin plastic. It's what trash bags are made out of, and painter's disposable tarp. Spring steel to just kind of open and close, and it's all mechanical. Really fragile, really delicate materials, really sort of ephemeral materials that are not meant to be used for art per se. They're made to be used once and thrown out, so they're really delicate. And it just kind of goes, it's a sort of ongoing inhalation and exhalation, all caused by this mechanical movement. When you're in the space, you can actually feel the sort of air on your skin. It's a very tactile sensation. And this one, especially because of the lights and the sound and the sort of sensory aspect of it, when I watch it, and I've seen other people have this reaction too, there's a tendency to want to sort of relax and sort of let yourself breathe with the it there. The other piece that's in the show is this one called Serpentine. This one I don't have a video for right now, but I can explain it. What we're seeing are these 2 almost like flexible steel arms opening and closing. This one has a little bit more programming, so it's not just opening and closing, it's opening, closing, opening a little bit, kind of pulsing in and out. And it's mimicking a dance. It's still this idea of creating a sort of abstract form of the body, an abstraction of breath, way to create tactility on the skin using air. But it's also referencing the Serpentine dance from Louis Fuller, who's a modern dancer who used to wear these beautiful long silk robes and sort of move her arms very gesturally with colored light. So it's a reference back to that as well. And I'm just gonna back up a minute and talk about how I got to making these breathing pieces. I don't usually show this work, but I thought it'd be a good opportunity. This piece is, I made it of residency in about probably like 2009, 2010. And it's created using muscle wire. So all my work, or most of the work, uses Arduinos, open source hardware that's pretty easy to program. This was one of my first experiences experimenting with it. And so I'll just show you some of the pictures and then I'll talk while the video is playing. These are actually two different pieces, similar forms. It's muscle wire, bone, and jewelry parts. So what we're looking at is a scene from my old studio, which is the white paper in the background covering up all the tools. But it's also these shape memory alloys that are being controlled by the Arduino, and electricity is heating them up. As they heat, the wires contract, and it's pulling the bones in one direction or another. And I'm programming about 9 different segments to move around, kind of like a tentacle. In addition to that, the bones of the chest, the ribs are actually very sort of subtly opening and closing, breathing, moving in and out.
What kind of animal were the bones from?
This was a coyote. So I wanted to, I was doing this before I went to grad school. And once I got into grad school, I experimented with the muscle wires a little bit more, but I just didn't feel right. I had ethical concerns, just kind of like going and finding these taxidermy animals and using them in sculpture. It just didn't sit right. So I kind of, that's when I started digging into the sort of more abstract forms and away from these kind of almost theatrical or even puppets. I mean, this is very sort of puppet-like to me. And this was kind of like a segue in between this piece where I had a bunch of the parts lying around, and I used some of the smaller bones that I thought were really interesting forms, and then some other things I put together just because I enjoyed the form. And then I hid Arduino inside this plaster base and made this sort of very simple, very gestural fluttering of bones, almost like a flower or a leaf in the wind. So it's kind of randomly opening and closing. And so this was actually right before I started making the breathing pieces. And so the first breathing piece that I went into was just kind of the sort of next step. I still wanted to use the muscle wires. I love motion. I love the way it makes people, it catches people. When you're making a sculpture, it's there in front of you. You get to walk around it. You get to see it. You get to react with it. It's a different sensation than looking at a painting or a drawing or any other 2D work. It changes as you go around it. And so for me, coming from a sculptural background, I love that part of it, but I always want to add another layer that kind of brings it in the same way where moving from 2D work to 3D work brings it closer to a sort of life, moving from 3D work and into work that is responsive, is choreographed, has motion to it, kind of sits it more in our realm, closer to us, closer to something that is I guess alive, or it causes us to respond differently. And so this piece was the first of the series of breathing pieces, and it's still using muscle wire and it's using laser cut acrylic, and it's just kind of me experimenting with how I can move air through a space. And so I made this. It's still about twice the capacity of a lung. And you feel it. You can, if you put your hand in front of it, you can feel the sort of tactile sensation of air moving across your skin, but you have to be so close. And so I just kind of like gradually expanded up and up. And from this piece came the work that's in the lobby of the Barry Art Museum. It's just simply called Body, and it's a sort of vertical piece that's connected to a couple pulleys and a motor. And it's about the size of a torso, and it sits eye level. And so in that work, you start to get a sensation that is, well, instead of being the size of like a dog, it becomes the size of a person, of a body, of a human. And then sort of moving forward from there are the sort of larger serpentine and immanence pieces that the serpentine and immanence pieces that sort of really allow you to not just feel the sensation on your skin or imagine it, but really kind of let you sort of be immersed in that space, immersed in the breath, immersed in the using the light, immersed in motion. And so this is pretty much the sum of the body series, and it's sort of or the breathing series. And I can show you a couple more, but that idea of breath, body, and tactility really kind of drove the work for a long time. This one's called Penumbra Body, and it's actually made of silk. The video is a little bit funny. It's actually stop motion, a lot more sort of gestural swaying of the fabric as it moves. But sort of practical reasons, it's really difficult to shoot video in a space that is blacked out and only has one LED light.
I love how it creeps. It's like, ooh, it's sort of making my skin crawl a little bit.
And so the flaring that we're seeing as well, the lens flaring, that's not just lens flaring in here. There's a really interesting thing that happened with the silk when the light's projected through it. We're actually seeing all that is there in person. You see it with your eyes. And I thought one sort of side note that I just really enjoy about this piece is that it goes from being a circle to a square.
When it gets pulled. Is it like a moire effect, sort of, as like the light goes through? Yeah, that's
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's really beautiful. The idea of this being a penumbra is sort of, it's a shadow in shadows.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then this was a model that I made as a proposal, and it sort of stands as a sort of segue into some of the work that I'm doing now. So it's just called Breathing Through the Front. It's very similar to that first breathing piece with the muscle wire. And it was for a show in Chicago. It wasn't realized, but again, it's a nice segue to what I'm doing now, which I make a lot of models and I do a lot of CAD work to propose my projects, to sort of visualize and just kind of see things that I wouldn't be able to see otherwise at the scale. So this would have been an outdoor sculpture that was intended to go in front of the Art Institute of Chicago as part of a exhibition they had during the sculpture conference. One year was there. It's a purely kinetic piece, and the idea was to have it move with motors, but also as the wind sort of flowed through. All of the metal on here in this one and in Immanence it's spring steel, so it's really, really flexible, which is what's letting me sort of get that motion. And so this was the proposal, and this is a big part of how I work now. oftentimes I'm looking for, I really enjoy making large scale work. I like making installation. I like making public work. I like making work that's larger than me and allows me to be immersed in the space. And so it was a really nice segue and transition to some of the work that I'm currently doing. So I installed this piece in 2019 at Pratt Institute, and it was part of their first run of art and science residencies. It's called the Steam Plant Residency, and I was teamed up with a couple, an architect and a designer to help me realize this piece. So what we're looking at are 200 LED bulbs. We're getting pretty short on time. I'm going to speed things up. 200 LED bulbs that are responding to muon particles, which are things that are created by cosmic rays, almost like cue ball breaking up the pool balls. And I'm not able to detect the cosmic rays, but I'm able to detect the muons that are created by it. And I use this little sensor here that I built. And with that sensor, I create a simulation of almost like stones being thrown into water. And as the stones are thrown into water, you get ripples, and those ripples are extrapolated onto this LED light grid. And so during the day you can kind of see the sort of ebbing and flowing, but really at night it comes alive and you get to see a lot more of the sort of, it almost looks like clouds that are being projected, but it's ripples, they're water ripples. It's all created from the sort of muon showers that are all around us and that go through our bodies all the time. The spaces that they penetrate are, there are thousands that we're exposed to every second. Let me just, for the sake of time, move into some stuff. Since you guys are have such a glass history, this is a sound piece called Scintillator, also another collaboration. It's being driven by another muon detector, but this muon detector was gifted to me from a scientist that works at the Brazilian Synchrotron facility. So it's a accelerator, and the boards calibrate the big accelerator beam. And then I use that to create some structured randomness and make these glass wine, crystal wine glasses sing by pulsing electromagnets and a hammer on them.
I've decided this is the right moment to have my first sip of red wine.
And just some photos of that. And all of that, all of the work just wouldn't have, like, it started with tinkering. All of my work, the breathing pieces, the large scale sculptures, the public installations, it started with taking things apart, putting them back together, very mechanical. And then at some point, someone said, hey, have you tried this thing called coding? And I just started messing around with it. And then I started doing some more interesting work. I mean, I love this work too. This is very visual, it's very formal. They're collages, they're moving collages. The last piece I want to talk about is a project that I'm currently working on. It's a collaboration between myself and another artist and engineer, Owen Trueblood. The work is called Anchorage Babble in reverse, and it's going in here. It's going into the anchorage of the Manhattan Bridge. Hoping to have it up in a month or so. So the anchorage is literally the part that holds the bridge together. It holds the suspension up, and it's anchored deep into the ground. If you've never been to New York, this is the Manhattan Bridge. We are working with a group called the Endangered Language Alliance. They're providing us a lot of audio for the work. And the audio that they're providing us with is that of about 500 native speakers of endangered languages that exist in New York. So languages that are expected to die out in about a generation or two. We're in production right now. We're putting things together. These are some of the boards. I've got a light over here. And we're putting 200 of these in underneath the Manhattan Bridge in the anchorage. The idea is that this idea of anchorage, immigration, diversity, and bridges. So diversity as being an anchor of New York City, and bridges being a sort of pathway and opportunity. And it was sort of made in response to an open call for placemaking public art sculpture. Anyway, I can get into that forever, but here's the simulation. It's pretty cool. So it's a little bit more dense with lights. We've kind of made it a bit more minimal, but each one of these lights represents one voice and one person speaking. The whole thing's interactive. So the idea of it being Babble in reverse is we're bringing voices together instead of pulling them apart. And when you approach it, it sounds like Babble, but when you go underneath it, we're actually tracking individual viewers and playing them one voice. So they can hear one voice, one person, one language living in New York. Here's an updated render of that project. And we are still raising money. So if you are interested in the project, and if you want to support it or even just see a little bit more about it, you can go to my website. We'll post a link in the chat where you can look a little bit at it, find out a little bit more. And if you're interested and would like to donate, be happy to, that would be great. And I think that's the last slide for me. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. Super exciting work. And it's cool to see where this work has brought you, where you started and where it is now. And I just love you calling those visual collages. The tinkering is just beautiful. And the glass one really speaks to me, obviously. So I'd like to invite Dr. Iftekharuddin and Megan Withrow back. And I wanted to just have a quick dialogue about where all of these projects in our show intersect and where they sort of diverge. There's some interesting intersection. And the reason I kind of smushed you all into this talk, because I know that we've covered a lot of ground tonight, was because from where I sat, from an administrative view, or maybe from a high view of all of this, you're all using machines to replicate emotion or to evoke emotion in a different way. It seems like you're both using coding and physical computing to program machines to make them somewhat lifelike, or to simulate life in some way, shape, or form. I loved what Megan had to say about the automotive syncopations. I don't remember the exact words that you said, but there was a really wonderful phrase about how there's sort of this involuntary response from the user when people are interacting with some of these machines. And I just wanted to say, like, as somebody who's been present to Joe's work and less present to the work that you guys have been doing in the laboratory, did you find yourself sort of accidentally syncing up your breath, or sort of like breathing with it? And I wanted you guys maybe to, do you find that at all with your experimentations? Have you noticed some of that automotive syncopations?
You to try Megan first?
So one thing that I know that we tend to do in the lab is we all tend to humanize the robot. So we'll say, we usually call a robot he, even though it has no gender. And then of course with the avatar, that's like syncing up your facial expression, really, with what you're seeing on the screen is the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if you also look at the like you just said, we use algorithm code and try to sort of come up with synthetic examples, right? And I think I saw some of those in Joe's work as well, right? And why is that needed? The reason it's needed is because to be able to create different examples, which may not be as easy with a real human, right? And it will take time. So this gives us the ability to create different examples. For example, those facial expressions that you saw with Avatar. In fact, we have a lot more real looking avatars that we have been able to generate. And some of those examples actually very similar to what Joe was showing with his CAD, and then breathing, and then being able to sort of look at it from an almost realistic perspective, right? So I think, and this also goes back to what Megan was talking about, that making robots or machines, but then thinking of them as if they're alive, they're with us, and they're basically participating in the activities. So the feedback the robot is giving to this child is as if another child is sort of working along with this child, right? So that's the sort of overall, I think, commonality that I could see between these two works.
Absolutely. I would agree with that. Joe, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten in the habit of saying thank you to my Google Home, so I understand. Yeah, absolutely. You want to like project like some humanness onto these things, and you want to find like, we want to find narratives, and we want to find like some connection with the thing that we're seeing. And I remember reading a while back some stuff about robotics, and one thing was about making robots that sort of interact with humans, and the one way to sort of increase attachment was to just put eyes on it. Doesn't matter what they look like, don't have to be real, they can be drawn on there. If that's eyes on it, pay attention to it. And so and for me, that's like motion. You put motion into it, and your body responds to it differently.
That's interesting. We have one other piece in the show that is just a collection of glass eyeballs that Elizabeth King has. A lot of people have been coming to it and being really unsettled by it because, you know, they're sort of like prosthetics. They literally are prosthetics. And they're just sort of sitting there gazing. And I'm noticing that it's a way, it's sort of the portal into the object that makes it feel human or not human, is whether or not there's this set of eyes. We had one question from the crowd for you guys in the laboratory asking a bit more about the Now robot. Who designed it? Where was it developed? And what do the colors mean? We noticed that there's certain colors with the one on view in the exhibit and different colors that you guys have in your laboratory. And do those colors have anything to do with the emotions, or is it completely random and arbitrary?
So the robot was originally developed by a company called Aldebaran. They were located in France, and it was purchased by SoftBank Robotics in Japan. And the different colors are actually related to which generation of robot. So in our videos, you saw there was an orange robot. So that was like the 4th generation of the robot. And then, you know, and later in the video, you saw there was a gray robot as well, which is the newest version that we have. So really it has nothing to do with the emotions, just with the, you know, how they decided to brand the commercial robot.
Got it. I know there's a lot of other people on campus that use the Now robot. I know this because there's a lovely couple other wonderful laboratories that are letting us borrow them. Have you guys had any interaction with the other people on campus that are also using the Now robot? Or are you guys really all kind of doing your own distinct projects?
Megan, you want to talk about that? You worked a little bit with this faculty. Yeah, Helen, and also another faculty in College of Education. What's the name? And I'm sorry, child. What's the name, Megan? I'm missing her name.
Are you talking about Dr. Crompton?
Yeah, Helen Crompton is one.
Yep, Helen Crompton.
Right, and then there was another faculty from, I think, Child Care Center.
Dr. Bobsian.
Yeah, Jonna Bobsian, right.
And I know also Dr. Kaipa has Now robots, and we've met up at, I think we had an event targeted at autism at one of our centers, research centers. I saw him there, and Dr. Crompton has come to our lab and visited us. And Dr. Bobsian collaborates with us on some of our publications in the past and has advised us in our current study setup as well. So yes, we talk.
It's good crossover. I was just wondering if we need to have like a Now robot party convention, bring everybody back together again at the museum. It's interesting because the second we heard about one, suddenly they all popped up all over campus. And I was like, how many Now robots do we have on campus right now? Seems like they're very versatile.
There are quite a few, yes.
So there's a few questions coming in from the crowd. This one's for Joe. Joe, I'd be interested in hearing about the materials you found the most challenging to work with, materials you found the most enjoyable to work with, and if you had unlimited amount of any certain material, what would it be?
That's an interesting. Well, I like the last part of that because if I had an unlimited amount of a certain material, it would be an unlimited amount of any material, all the materials. I just like to combine everything. I'm like it's a vault up here for materials. You know, some people are really good with numbers. Some people are like they have their thing that they know a lot about. Mine is materials. You can tell me something once about any material, and it's just gonna get locked in there. The materials I enjoy working with and things that are most frustrating. I mean, they're all frustrating at some point or another. But I really just enjoy working with my hands. I really enjoy machining things. I do a lot of industrial processes, so like lathes and mills. For things that move, you have to make sure that they spin on center and so that they don't wobble back and forth. So I use a lot of metalworking tools, but then I also do a lot of 3D printing and laser cutting just because it's so fast. So I go back and forth between drawing, CAD, woodworking tools, metalworking tools. I'm a tool nerd, so they're my toys. But
I would love to see your tool cabinet. I really judge people based on like how organized their tools are and what taxonomy they use. I walked into one artist studio and they just had labels that said like things that turn, things that cut. I was like, oh, that's an interesting way of dividing the tools.
I have a drawer. I just reorganized my tools in one of my drawers, and I have to remind myself when I go over there every time, like, okay, this is in the drawer of things that look like pliers.
Things that look like pliers. Got it.
May not be pliers, but funny thing about the materials too is like I just started recently teaching in foundation art and design program, and I'm loving getting back to sort of the basics of like clay and plaster and just really sort of abstract forms using like some of the most sort of moldable things. So I'll pose that. I can see that Charles was the person that asked that. So Charles, is there anything that any material that you're thinking about when you're asking that question?
We'll see if Charles pings us back. So there's an anonymous person saying, what's the smallest piece you've ever worked on? And have you used any 3D printers as part of your art?
Oh, that's me. Smallest piece. Yeah, no, I don't like there's small pieces, components in the work, but I typically make like pretty large scale pieces. I make some tabletop pieces that are about that big, but I just jump into, and you know, sometimes I kick myself in the butt for doing this. These like really big installation size pieces. So, you know, that light piece is like gonna be a couple hundred of these. It's 3D printed and laser cut parts plus industrial manufactured spun metal that we've had fabricated. So yeah, I have many 3D printers.
Love it. So basically it sounds like you want it all.
All of it, yes.
So the last question I wanted to pose back to the three of you is both of your projects involve extensive experimentation. And I just wanted to like touch on that for a moment. Experimentation for Joe seems like it's very like physical and material based. Experimentation for Dr. Iftekharuddin and Rithro, you guys, it's a different kind of experimentation. So I just wanted to touch on experimentation for a second and sort of maybe if you guys could say what the most challenging part of both of your projects has been, that would be helpful. There's been a number of questions about how challenging things are.
So for us, I think the most challenging is to recruit the subjects, because in our case, we're dealing with these kids with autism, and it's not easy for the parents and caregivers to really do this when they really don't see a tangible benefit yet, right? So that's one. And then once you get them in the lab, being able to work with them and then be able to really go through these different experiments. You just saw a piece of it. And so it's been a huge effort for the students, especially Megan and others who had been trying to do this. And many times, sometimes they want to come maybe in the weekends and after hours and things like that. So those are the sort of difficult things for mostly the students in most cases. For us also to be able to develop these experiments and study that are relevant, because it's not just be able to come up with experiments, but it has to be something that really brings out the specific question that we are trying to answer for these kids. So that's the human aspect of it has been challenging. Megan, you want to add anything?
I definitely agree with everything that Dr. Khan said, but I would also like to maybe highlight a different aspect that maybe Joe will also relate to, is when we're developing algorithms to analyze the data or to develop some sort of stimuli to show or to troubleshoot the robot itself. There's kind of an iterative process that we need to go through in writing the code and programming and developing. And sometimes that's challenging when you get a cryptic trace back from your code, trying to track down the problem. And I say, in the development of the AI-based algorithms, it can take a very long time to train the algorithms so that they can actually be useful in the project. So if there is a problem, it takes a long time to find out because it takes a long time to get to that point. So that's also a challenge.
Yeah, definitely iteration. There's many iterations and drawings and in the software and the coding. I look at, I wish my craft in coding was as good as my craft in hand making. But I think also maybe part of what because I get this question a lot, and I think maybe part of what the question is also like, these things seem really complex. And how do you get there? Like, you've been working on this for 10 years. It's a really long time. And for me, like the imminence piece, that had been made better in multiple iteration after iteration, and the software, the hardware, how I transport it and put it together. And I kind of like to bring this idea of complexity down to, it's actually what makes it complex is it's a bunch of simple things stacked on top of each other. And it's kind of like a house. A house is made of bricks. You can stack bricks and you can make a really beautiful house. But it's still a very sort of simple act. And it's the same way with making these things. They look really complicated. They look complex, but if you kind of strip it back piece by piece, you'll find that it's, at least my work is mainly a lot of simple movements just stacked on top of each other.
Thanks, guys. That's wonderful. Well, we've gone over time, but I'd like to keep going over time because this is so fun. Charles did get back to us, by the way. Chat, he had some questions about concrete and metal printers are a thing too. Not sure if you ever looked into that, but nonetheless excited to see your work at the exhibit. In general, he was saying that there was no material in particular, and really likes the mentioning of the 3D printer. I personally am like totally mesmerized by the weird Calder-esque sound wine glass situation. That thing is pure magic. Thank you all so much for presenting today, for being so generous with your time, for allowing us to exhibit your various projects and all of the research and hard work that's gone into them. We're really honored to have them on display at the Barrie Art Museum. We'll also have a 3D tour of the show up pretty soon. So wherever you live, if you happen to be far away, you're welcome to jump on our website and you'll be able to see it that way as well. So thank you. And I'm going to show just a couple last slides here as we leave. Let's see here. Coming up, we have a number of really fun programs. We have the Automata Tuesday, where we turn on an automata every third Tuesday and like wind it up. That's on Instagram Live as well as in person. Our next Unite, which is a public evening, we're kind of inspired by Joseph Morris's emotive machines. We have yoga, we have breathing, we have meditation, we have, you know, infused waters. It's going to be really wonderful. We hope that you can join us. It's March 11th from 5 to 8 p.m. It's free and open to the public. We also have a tour this Saturday of Motion Emotion. Those are always free from 1 to 1:45. The next lecture next month is between Elizabeth King and Jer Ryder. So Elizabeth King is a contemporary artist who is also in the exhibit. Her work is phenomenal and she's super inspired by Automata. Jerry Ryder, who is from the Morris Museum, no relation to Joseph Morris, just a museum with lots of automata. He's a conservator, and so he builds automata, and he actually built one for us that shows people how the inner workings work. And it's going to be a really fun conversation about the history of automata and how they've inspired some contemporary pieces. If you loved this, you want to do some more, think about being a museum member. We really appreciate it. That's how we get all these free programs to happen. And thank you. Thank you all so much for joining us. Have a beautiful evening. Thanks, Joe. Have a great night. Bye,
Yeah.
Very happy to see you. Bye.
It's been a blast. We'll do it again sometime. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.